Let's talk about new vocabulary. We're going to introduce some terms that might be new to you, and we're going to also talk about some common terms that we might be using in a slightly different way. First up is design. The simplest definition of design is what makes your ideas tangible. They can be physical things like buildings or application forms. They can be processes, like the process with which an application goes through a review in different departments. You can also design digital products, mobile apps, websites. This is typically what you think of when you think of digital service design. More often than not, people think of design as visual design, how something looks. A website, are the colors attractive? Is the layout nice? That's a part of design, but I'd like to challenge you to think of design more holistically. Think about design as the steps that someone goes through from the beginning of a process all the way to completion. When the entire process is designed mindfully, then the process flows from step to step intuitively, reducing confusion and increasing people's satisfaction with the overall process. Everything you interact with was designed. Some were designed very intentionally, and others not so much. Human-centered design is a process that involves human input during each step of the process. Agile, in simple terms, is a set of methodologies and practices where the solutions evolve through collaboration between self-organizing and cross-functional teams. It's an iterative development process where feedback continually is gathered from users and stakeholders to revise experiences and make them better and better with each iteration. Key to this is that the teams are not only self-organizing and cross-functional, but if the team decides they need a person with a certain expertise, they have the authority to add that person to the team when needed. So in other words, learn about the problem, build the smallest thing possible, test to see if people like it, learn from those results, and do it over and over again until it works well enough. Product. Very simple way to describe product is, can you build a thing that solves the problem? Now this thing can be physical, it can be the way a building is laid out, it could be a mobile app, it could be a call center script, it could be a audit process, a staff training program. Product can be anything that solves a problem. It's not always something tangible, and it's not always a digital product. Product management. This is the role that is responsible for getting the entire team and sponsorship to fall in love with a problem. It also means clearly defining and agreeing upon what that problem is, and then helps the teams blend their skills and talents to make an awesome solution. Oftentimes, the product manager lives at the intersection between user experience, technological abilities and constraints, and the business goals. So it's a very complex yet incredibly satisfying job. And this is not to be confused with project management, which is focused more on scope, time, and cost, but that's a different conversation. A prototype. What's the simplest, quickest version of an idea that you can build to see if it solves a problem? And often I tell people, prototype with paper and sticky notes, because it's really easy to put an idea in front of somebody on paper and say, hey, if it looked like this or if it worked like this, would you like it? And if they don't, you can erase it, draw something new and say, does this work better? To prove your idea works, it's much easier to change paper and rearrange sticky notes than it is to make changes in code. Ideation. It's a fancy way of saying brainstorming. And brainstorming is just a fancy way of saying, let's get knowledgeable people together in the same room and throw out tons and tons of ideas. With brainstorming, you want to go with quantity, not quality. That first idea, the crazy idea, may not actually be the solution, but the fifth or sixth idea that comes from that first crazy idea, that might be the one that wins the day and solves the problem. There's also a common typo. For some reason, I always write Brianstorming when I try to write brainstorming. It's also a song by Arctic Monkeys from 2007, which one of my favorite bands. Waterfall. Waterfall is considered a traditional way to build software products and services. Waterfall typically consists of gathering all your requirements up front, designing extensively, and then building the entire product, and then delivering it within scope, time, and cost limitations. So waterfall is more closely associated with project management. However, in the fast-changing world of software, to do this methodology requires some form of clairvoyance in order to make sure that you've designed it well up front. Waterfall works very well for certain types of efforts. For example, For example, when the United States government was building the B-52 program, waterfall methodologies made sense and worked quite well. B-52 is still flying, it's 80 some odd years later. If I was to build a data center, I would use waterfall methodologies. I wouldn't necessarily use an agile approach to build a data center, like buy one server, see how it does, buy another server. You would think ahead to what's the capacity and what's the amount of traffic you expect to see, and then you would buy those servers to handle that capacity and install them all at the same time. So waterfall works well for certain types of projects. The idea with fail fast is to do extensive testing and incremental development to determine if an idea has value. The idea with fail fast is that you freely experiment and you learn what works and what doesn't work while you're trying to reach some desired result. By quickly finding these failures, you learn what works and what doesn't work, so you can optimize and increase the things that work well and stop doing the things that don't work well. One thing that I've noticed is, depending on the culture of your organization, the term fail can be quite negative and can be hard for people to start using in a different context. So if your organization really doesn't like using the term fail, use another terminology. Learn fast, or continuous learning, or continuous improvement. These phrases mean the exact same thing, but they don't have the same negative connotation that the word fail can have. The important thing is to remember the principles behind it. Put an experiment out there, see if people like it, improve the things that they don't like, and increase the things that they do like. A psychological safety doesn't mean that you're able to show up and employ your whole self at work without fear of negative consequences, that you be comfortable freely brainstorming ideas, even ones that might be considered out there. Does it mean a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking? Does it mean that the team members feel accepted and respected? Or is psychological safety the number one determinant of a high-performing team versus a poor-performing team? The answer is all of the above. Studies have shown that psychological safety is the number one determinant in how well a team performs. The team's seniority, years of experience, overall educational levels, none of that is as important as how psychologically safe the team feels amongst each other. The more that you as a leader or a manager can help create psychological safety in your teams, the better overall those teams will perform. Has anything from this set of definitions surprised you? Has anything made you curious to know more? I encourage you to go and do more research on these and decide how these different approaches can help you and your team achieve everything you want and more.